an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 564 through 566, Back to Zero, Earnest Wishes for Luffy, Luffy's all-out attack, Red Hawk blasts, and coming to an end, the final decisive battle against Hordy. In these episodes, really, I'm going to be honest, guys, it's more of the same. I'm bored. These episodes were kind of whatever. The one bright spot for me, as always, was Chopper. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you much to Florian for commissioning this episode. And Florian is also here in the chat. Thank you, Florian, for bearing with me as I have had to reschedule this. I feel like all year, all I've done is reschedule every week. Like, it's just been nonstop. So I just really appreciate how much everybody rolls with it. It is essential. So these, like I said in the intro, these episodes, it really does feel like we are recovering a lot of ground, and it doesn't feel like this needs to be as long as it is. I mean, this is just going to be a sort of ongoing issue for me with this series, I think, and I know that everybody is aware of it, and it's just sort of a thing that's done because of trying to stay in pace with the manga. So I can accept that, understand the reason for it, and still feel like this is really not, for me, I think that there are ways to draw things out that don't feel like you're simply drawing them out. And right now, you feel it completely. That's what's happening here. So we start things off with 564 with Fukaboshi, the prince, and he is reflecting on the fact that it is low-key their fault as the royals of Fishman Island that Hordy and his friends are as filled with hatred as they are, because they were not looked after. He feels like we had our priorities all messed up, and we didn't do what we needed to for the Fishman district, and they were allowed to sort of fester because they had all of these resentments due to the way they were living already, and they just sort of transferred those feelings onto human beings and are blaming them for it. This is the sort of thing that I feel is a real wobbly sort of premise, because it feels like we're blaming only the lowest income is the vibe I get, like the people who are at the bottom of the social order, for all of the unrest now. And it just, the way that there has been this sort of talk of hierarchy in this world over and over again in different areas, depending on what the characters at the time are like, it is kind of odd to me to be like, oh, well, all of these people who we weren't doing our duty to, they never would have felt this way about human beings if we hadn't ignored them. And I'm not really feeling like that works. I don't know. I think the reason for me that it doesn't work is because it doesn't feel like it's fully explored before we get here. So it's sort of being used retroactively as an explanation, but it doesn't have any real impact because we didn't watch that, and we didn't get to see the way that all of this developed over time, we're just going into flashbacks and finding out the ways in which, you know, Hordy and his friends grew up and how they are, what's the word I want? The oppression that they have all suffered here. So speaking of, we're going into a flashback here. It's a weird animation style because Hordy is eating an apple and he's like his little sort of 8-year-old looking self. And he is like all in grayscale, as are the surrounding buildings and people. But the apple is bright red. And it was really reminding me of like Pirates of the Caribbean, with the whole thing with the apple in that. So we hear a pirate like talking about how the humans are responsible for everything that's been going wrong. They are stealing the mermaids away, and we've got to do something before the island falls. And somebody else is responding like, well, we've just got to kill them before they kill us. We can't leave a single one alive. And he is overhearing this like being said in an alley as he walks by. And I kind of thought, as the way that the voices were, it's not immediately apparent that he is actually physically walking past the people who are talking. I'm sorry if you can hear that, guys. Pippin is chewing on a little chew bone there, and it is so incredibly loud. I just let him into my office because sometimes he needs some time away from the kitten because he loves her, but she is really up his ass like a lot. So, but anyway, I had thought that what we were hearing was like a voiceover from somebody specific, that we were going to find out that there was a particular leader that Hordy had been radicalized by, and this all of this talk was him thinking about a speech that was made or something like that. But it's not. It's just like kind of conversation. And then we see all of the other like henchmen that he has as children, and they are all saying the same thing about how, you know, humans are scum and we've got to get rid of them and yada, yada, yada. And then there's a mention of a hero, and we see this like picture frame being set up, and it's a strange, like, he looks pretty human. He's got a sort of like triangular head, one of those heads that goes straight into a neck that's actually wider than the head. But somebody is saying this man sacrificed his life to blow up the human shop and set the slaves free. Pay your respects. And everybody is standing around it. There's all these flowers and they're cheering for it. And Hordy says, a hero, huh? And really, it is making quite an impression on him, the way that everybody is standing and supporting this person. And he starts to say, serves them right, stupid humans. And his friends begin to chime in with like, that guy's awesome. Yeah, that's what we should be doing. Count me in. It feels like just so abrupt. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just such a sudden, he's hearing all of this rhetoric and all of these people saying that humans are trash and whatever. And then there's this guy who basically was like a suicide bomber, which he's saving slaves. So I really have nothing against that in principle in certain ways. But it felt like it was so sudden. So we go away from that flashback and we come into another flashback, but it is in full color. It's not in the like weird grayscale the other one was in. And it's Arlong and his buddies, and he's being like, you know, just lauded by everybody around him. And he's the one who starts talking about like, now I'll tell you about those wretched worms they call human. We're the superior race. They became jealous and afraid, and then they began to persecute our people. And I wind up sort of getting what I thought I was going to get in the last scene, which is somebody who is older and more experienced radicalizing these younger kids. Turns turns into this huge shadow behind child Hordy and then dissolves into flames. And we see child Hordy standing there with the flames like dancing in his eyes. And it was just a really like, it was an effective animation design, but it felt strange to me. And he goes on and says like, you know, there are people who are dead and they had bitterness in them, and you need to take that on and make it your own and hold on to your anger. And that is essentially how he has functioned. So when we kind of jump forward in time a little bit, we have Hachi talking about there's a really nice human named Rayleigh that I met on the surface, and he's not as mean as the other humans are. He doesn't even look disgusted when he sees me. And Hordy turns and walks away and says, I don't like your stupid stories. They make me sick. And honestly, I can't help but feel like Hachi just saying he doesn't even look disgusted when he looks at me. It is such a like bare minimum. I mean, not even that. It isn't heartwarming. I think Hachi is trying to be like, not all humans are bad, but to frame it like that and make it sound like what a great guy because he doesn't look like he wants to vomit at the sight of me is like, it really isn't doing what I think Hachi is trying to make it do. So we see Hordy just like in this sort of time lapse where he's just walking toward the camera, but he is growing over time. And he is really internalizing what Arlong said about holding on to bitterness and hate them. And I don't know, guys. It's just flat. You know what I'm saying? Like, it feels, because we actually don't see Hordy being mistreated by humans in any particular way. The way that he just leaps into this because he doesn't have anybody better to hate, I guess, or anything better to do with his energy, it doesn't really have as much of an impact. Now, the problem with me saying that is that I am trying to assign a logic to the sort of hatred that doesn't really have logic behind it when you really come down to it. So I understand and acknowledge that. I mean, this is sort of the issue with a lot of people. There's been some parents who have been sharing stories of figuring out that their sons have been radicalized and that they were on certain corners of the internet and began watching certain YouTube videos, and the rhetoric about how, you know, people of color are taking over and woke politics and women don't know their place anymore and, you know, yada, yada, yada. It had sunk its teeth into them and was holding on tight. And it was just that these kids felt anger and resentment for some reason, and it was never consistent why. It was just that they felt dissatisfaction for a variety of reasons, and they needed somebody to blame, and here came someone who was like giving them an answer, giving them a way to direct that rage so that it felt like they were being righteous. And also the fact that everybody else was like, well, you're so wrong about this and how can you say that? They could tell themselves, oh, they don't get it. I'm the only one who really, like, only me and my friends can see through the bullshit because we are so tuned in and everybody else is still blind, you know? And I think that the problem for me is Hordy's life and like how he grew up and everything isn't actually shown to us. We see him walking the streets all the time. We see him hanging out with his friends, but we don't see him like struggling to live, not having anywhere to sleep at night, who the adults in his life are. You know, there's just a lot of him just at random wandering around with his little cronies, and there's no background to him as a real person that gives you an understanding of where the rage would be coming from and that it could be redirected toward humans. Like, the rage itself doesn't seem to really be coming from anywhere. And while you can just sort of look at the situation he's in and gather from that he doesn't have an adult responsible for him in his life, that he doesn't have anybody who is caring for him, and he doesn't have a home, we can pick that up, but it's not actually being shown to us. And if we were to be shown suddenly that he did have parents and he did have a home, it wouldn't feel like that was out, like that contradicted anything. It would just be a little bit surprising. But I just feel like if you want to tell the story of someone who gets sort of scooped up and radicalized by a person, you always have to start with them feeling oppressed and misunderstood and not getting their due for whatever reason. And we just don't get that part with Hordy. So the rage, it feels like, is totally manufactured, and that really what he's after is being seen as a hero because, you know, he saw this one portrait of this guy. And I don't know. It's just, this storyline is so annoying, you guys, because it's like, it's got all the elements, you know, but none of them are fleshed out enough. And then there are things that are just fleshed out in the same way so repeatedly that it's like, yeah, we get it, you know? So especially considering talking about how this has felt so drawn out, if we did have some further backstory on Hordy and the way that he grew up and how this all started in a more concrete way, that would actually be quite effective drawing things out. It's at least giving further dimension, you know, giving him some layers and getting us to understand why he would be walking around so angry. But it's hard to feel like this hatred is very real because the whole time that he's like hearing what Arlong is saying, he's like grinning into the camera. And I get that it's supposed to be that he's like grinning like in a villainous sort of way, and it's supposed to be a smile that's like not a smile. But because, again, we don't see him ever being really mistreated by anybody or denied anything, it's just, it's not coming from anywhere. So it feels almost like he is gleeful and not angry, not hateful, that it's all like a complete sham, when I think we're meant to actually believe that he truly hates them now as an adult. So anyway, like I said, it just feels very flat and unsatisfying to me. So I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to jump ahead here, but my computer, I ordered the new one and it is on its way. But oh, right. This is when somebody comes through and announces that Tiger has been slain. And Zio says something about how, like, I guess he wasn't the hero that we needed. So this is why Hordy winds up, like, stepping into the breach there. Because Tiger was not radical enough, evidently. And we see all of them, like, wearing these hoods at one point. And they are standing outside of a fishman's home. And it's him, and then he's got his wife behind him holding a child. And Zio is saying, "Is it true you gave your blood to humans?" And he says, "So what if I did? He was dying. I had to help him." And they pick this guy up by the throat and like set his house on fire. It's unclear whether they actually like kill the guy. I think that it's just supposed to be that they set the place on fire. And the whole like energy of this is very reminiscent of like the KKK coming and burning down the homes of Black people or, you know, civil rights activists. And it's just a weird energy to be putting on them when they are genuinely oppressed by people. Like the comparisons just don't quite work here. It's so odd, you know? It reminds me a little bit of like in the show True Blood. There are a lot of parallels that they try and draw with the gay community and vampires and the rights that they are fighting for and the bigotry that they encounter. But then, like, eventually we get to see vampires that are killing an entire wedding party and eating a baby. And it's like, well, you know, you can't talk about how, like, oh, people should give them rights because they're, you know, there's nothing different about them except what they eat. And they're still, when you've got them eating babies and killing like 30 people and rolling around in the blood on the floor for fun. You can't equate these things. And this show is not trying to do it as overtly, but because of the imagery being so particular, it's clear to me what we're doing here, you know? So we see all of them like hanging around and drinking and talking about the various people that are sort of giving up the cause and not really having the kind of pride that they should have in being a fishman. Jinbei is mentioned specifically because he has joined the Marines, and Hordy says, "We need a new kind of hero, someone with no fear who can set the country straight." And then we jump ahead to the assassination of the queen, and the way that this all like shakes out basically is eventually we find out about the drug, and Hordy is like, "Can you duplicate these?" And Zio says, "I'll try." I can't remember who asks how he got his hands on it, but he doesn't give them a direct answer. And I am really curious about this as well. And I kind of feel like whatever the answer is going to be, it's going to reveal that maybe there is something about the distribution of this drug that is like really shady. I don't know. I just can't help but think about the distribution of crack cocaine and how that was targeted specifically in African American communities. And it was, you know, acknowledged, like we have paperwork validating that that is what happened, and it was done with that purpose in mind, to bring down Black communities from the inside. And so a part of me is like, are we doing that now? Is this what we're doing? Because, like, you know, the fact that Hordy kind of has this like kinky hair, it feels like he is almost black coated in the way that he is animated at times. So there are just a lot of things that line up for me. And yeah, he's telling them like the day of reckoning is coming. And then we come back to the present, and he is saying like, you know, this is the end of the line for all of you, and we're finally taking our revenge. He is still chasing after Luffy, who is being carried by the princess, and they are attempting to beat the ship and try and pull it out of the way. And this is when the prince, who is looking up and watching this because he's injured, so he can't, you know, do anything, but he is thinking about, we neglected the Fishman district and let it become a breeding ground. We pretended not to see the resentment as it built up as a result of their isolation. Even as it descended into lawlessness, we lived in willful ignorance. I guess I feel like he's basically saying, if they weren't living in such poverty, they wouldn't have been so angry and they wouldn't have been radicalized. But like the hatred of humans from their poverty, why wouldn't they hate the royals for not caring for them? Like, where the anger, because like they do dislike the royals, we see, and that's why they target the queen, but because of the fact that she is trying to make nice with the humans. And what is it that the prince thinks they should have done? Should they have gone in and distributed wealth and given these people like a leg up? Because I think that you should do that anyway, regardless. If you have the resources, why is there poverty on Fishman Island to begin with? And like it just, the assertion that he is making is like, we just pretended not to see it. It just all feels so sort of thrown together. I thought collecting the signatures would help, but it wasn't addressing the true issue. Please forgive me, Mother. I'm so sorry. And then we have her, saying that we can't have people's minds polluted with hatred, that can't be the way that we move forward. And he realizes, like, it was too late. Despite everything that she said, all that she feared had already been set in motion. And the real enemy was the hatred and resentment building in our hearts. I should have looked inward, but I looked outward. My mother's true killer was the grudge that festered among our people while we turned a blind eye. I suppose, but like, the humans are actually like capturing and enslaving you. You know what I'm saying? Like, granted, these guys didn't experience that, but the whole thing is just very cobbled, and it doesn't feel like we've got a great thesis, except for the fact that, like, we shouldn't hate. Hatred is the enemy. But it's just not really actually getting to the heart of the issue here. So, let's see. Oh, yeah, Fukaboshi starts yelling up to Luffy. And he says, Straw Hat, please erase our past. Set us back to zero. Eradicate the shadows cast by our grudge so that we may see the light. What does that mean? How is Luffy meant to do that? Just by, like, killing Hordy? That doesn't feel like that's going to do the job. And we have the dudes in that little side ship, and they are aiming at the Noah, and they have that huge bubble ready, and they send it toward it, and we see it, like, it just travels so slowly, and it feels like the ship is definitely going to outstrip it and reach Fishman Island before the bubble will. So I'm watching this, and Hordy is still pursuing Luffy, and I don't think he sees the bubble. It like, eventually Luffy says, Brother Hoshi, just let me do this my way. Trust me. And we have some people who are on the ground saying, like, wait, is that the Straw Hat Pirates fighting in the... And we find out that everybody is sort of realizing the Straw Hats are actually on our side, that these are humans and they are helping us. The news is spreading further out across the island. So finally, the bubble hits the Noah and begins to encircle it. The Noah is just so enormous that it's really hard for me to wrap my head around. And it's in the bubble. All of these dudes are cheering because it has slowed it down. And we have Luffy here saying, like, our minds were made up as soon as we got here about saving the island. Leave it to me and my crew. Again, he has made a speech about how we're definitely going to save everybody a few times now. And about how that's what friends are for, right? It's just the difference is now that he is saying this on a transponder snail so that everybody can hear it. So finally he says to the princess, like, you've got to follow my lead. I promise that he won't hurt you. And she holds Luffy out, just like sort of between her hands, and lets him go. And he starts to head toward Hordy, who really does look absolutely terrifying at this point. Like, Hordy's design and the way that it keeps getting amped up, he looks creepier and creepier. So back on the ground, fighting, continuing with our other friends. We have Frankie getting spit at by the weird squid guy who turns into ink eventually. And he says, I can copy myself with squid ink. The spirit of the squid is unstopped, and it cuts off because he does the fireball. Frankie attacks him with his worst fear because this guy just can't stop talking about how he's going to become cooked in a variety of ways, whether it be deep fried or steamed or roasted or grilled or broiled or whatever. And I was unclear, guys. Is that copying with the ink? Is that a devil fruit power, or is this something that all squid can do? It feels to me like a devil fruit power, but I think based on the fact that he follows that up with like the spirit of the squid is unstoppable, it felt like he was saying all squid could do this. So at this point, Chopper chimes in and he is like very impressed with Frankie, and he gets distracted, and we have the hammerhead shark using his hammer on... I can't believe this, guys. He uses his hammer on Chopper, who stops it with his fist. And then when the camera pulls out, we have a new iteration of Chopper yet again. He is huge. And he has this weird sort of like... It looks almost like a car tire covered in fur around his neck. But his head is like mostly the same size. And I was just not really sure what to make of it, because I don't know what the significance is of this design, if there's any like particular reason for it. But Zorro says, I thought this was supposed to be your normal looking form. Don't you worry about looking so freaky? And Chopper says, I wanted to look human before because I didn't have any friends, but now I want to be a monster so that I can help Luffy. And Zorro is quite approving of this. I like seeing Zorro approve of anybody because it's so rare. So here comes the octopus man. I'm sorry, Pippin. Pippin's over here nudging me. He has to go out, but you can wait just a few more minutes. I'll let you in a sec, buddy. But the octopus man is like... This dude is all over the place. He just really... Eventually, Zorro calls him a frog. And he's like, well, maybe I am like a frog. And we see that he can like excrete poison. And I'm like, well, then why haven't you been doing that the whole time? Why is that something that happened because of the pill that he's taking? And he's just sort of, it's accentuating some other things that he can do. Anyway, so... On the second of these 3 episodes is my personal favorite fight, because it's between Brook and Zio. And Zio is just such a fucking weird character, and they keep doing the thing that I love, where Zio looks incredibly intimidating and frightening, and then something idiotic happens and it makes him so embarrassed and he can't admit it. So he is coming up behind Brook, and he's talking about what an imbecile Brook is, because you don't even know that I'm coming and you're going to be dead before you know what hit you. But Brook can sense something is off and just uses his sword and manages to get this guy, like, even though he was invisible until the last second, he gets him. I can't remember if it's in the chest or what. But Zio says, you've fallen into my trap. Little did you know that was my weapon destroying technique. The body sword crush. Now the tip of your sword has crumbled. It's worthless. And there's just a bit of a pause. Pippin, calm down, bud. Sorry, guys. He's just a lot more interruptive today than normal. But there's just a pause, and then Brook says, no, I stabbed you. And that got me laughing so hard. Brook's whole thing here is delightful. Eventually, Zio thinks that he has like decapitated Brook. And for real, this man is a skeleton. I feel like you should know. Decapitating him isn't going to do it. The man has no organs. He has no skin. There's no veins. Why would you think this would do anything? So he like yanks Brook's head off with this chain, and he stands around laughing to himself about it for like way too long, until eventually Brook's head like rolls back toward him, and he just picks it up and is like, yeah, no, I'm fine, actually. It takes so long for him to just say that. And he says, you can chop me up as much as you like, but none of the things that give you life are what give me life. It's my soul. And again, with Zio, like, screaming and his weird eyes bugging out and all the people around him. Like, I killed him so hard it brought him back to life. Man, I'm good. You guys, I love it. It's so stupid, but I need something to cling to in this arc, so this is doing it for me, you know? And Brooks says, I'm already dead. You're not going to kill me twice. And he pulls out his sword and says, this blade I wield is like none other, sharpened by the Long Arm tribe and granted a befitting name, Soul Solid. Engrave that title upon your heart. And he points it at him, and instead of like trying to fight with it like a normal sword, it shoots this blue ice at him. And he says that it's pulling like this blood-curdling wind right from the land of the dead. It'll freeze you with the frigid air. And Zio has the ice like on his face, and Brooks says, as its icy grip claims you, gaze upon its bitter blade. And it's just so like, he does a haiku later. He is really going for the flair in this episode, and I'm pretty into it, actually. So he gets distracted at this point by Usopp, who's cheering him on, and we jump over to Usopp for a little while with this guy who I think at some point says that he is a cookie cutter shark. I'm going to look this up because I feel like I can't imagine why a shark would be called a cookie cutter shark. Okay. He doesn't really... I expected there to be like a frill around his head. The designs for these guys don't really... there's not a real like lineup with the actual shark that they're meant to be in their design. I keep thinking it's going to be a little bit more relevant than it is, but like... The cookie cutter sharks, they're not even red. Well, I guess you could, it's red like brown red. But yeah. The cookie cutter shark does not sound intimidating either. I feel like that's not anything. So when he corrects Usopp, I was sort of like, you might want to just let it, let Usopp call you what he called you, because that sounded actually more badass. Cookie cutter shark is just failing to impress here. So we go back to the fight, and Hordy is coming at Luffy again. You think you're going to protect everybody on this island? And Luffy does second gear, and he does Gum Gum Jet, and he manages to like stop Hordy in place. He punches him in the gut and sends Hordy flying backwards, but it doesn't really do damage exactly. It just sort of is he makes himself into enough of an obstacle. And, the fight at this point starts to get a little bit more desperate. Luffy does the armament with second gear, and it's just sort of the fight itself, guys. It's just Hordy coming at Luffy and Luffy like punching him back or throwing him over and over and over. It's not exactly dynamic, It's the same, I'm just going to rush at you with all the force and speed I can. And I think the intent is just going to be like, I'll break you into pieces with the force of the impact of it or something. Whatever it is, Hordy isn't pulling out any like moves that are interesting to watch. And I guess like it's supposed to be that him taking these pills is the interesting part, but it's very intermittent with him doing that. And so his fight, it's not exciting. It's just kind of him throwing himself against a wall over and over again. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, Luffy punches him hard enough that he like goes through the top deck of the Noah. And the prince sees that and seems a little bit worried, like just, we said that we weren't going to destroy that shit, bud. How about you don't actually? And I'm just trying to jump around a little bit because we do meet up with our friends back on the ground again and sort of see how everybody is doing. And Zio is managing to do a kind of rousing speech here with all of his chains. And it's impressive, but I just know now what a goober he is. So he's got his back to Brooke, and Brooke comes at him from behind. It's like, oh, good, there you are. And the hammerhead shark comes up to the crowd that has gathered and is just saying, like, blame the humans. They're the ones that made us this way, as he brings the hammer down. And, talk about, like, unsubtle. Take that rage of yours and let it loose on all of humanity. They deserve your hate. Look around. Do you know what they've done to us? They're the ones behind every disaster the fishmen have met. And one of the little kids says, is everything he's saying true? And another fishman chimes in and says, no, that's ridiculous. I mean, sure, humans have done plenty of awful things, especially when you look at their history with... And Charlie cuts in and just says, that's enough. And she says to the little boy, you can see what's happening with your own eyes. Just look on the ground and in the sky. The humans are fighting against the new Fishman pirates for us. I don't like that. I get what she's doing, and just like humans aren't all bad, look at the way they're trying to help. But this guy's starting to say, like, well, it's not untrue. And then her interrupting and being like, stop it. I couldn't help but think, if you don't want children to know the actual truth, you have something to hide. You have like an agenda. And I feel like he deserves to know that, yes, humans have done terrible things. Maybe that this guy is too extreme, but we've got a crew of 7 people down here. Is it 7 now? And they are all exemplary examples of the human race. Some of them aren't human, granted, but I don't feel like she's really making a solid case that would stand up to scrutiny much here. It just feels like she's kind of lying. And, she's like, the important thing about this crew, despite being strange, is that they're doing what you're doing and you have to see for yourself. That's the only way to understand the truth. No matter what you've heard in the past, you must look at today with an objective eye, which, sure, except that they aren't up in the human world watching the way humans still treat fishmen. So, like, you're not giving them the whole story, and it just... the whole thing doesn't quite hang together. When you stop and take apart any given moment, it all just feels like we're belaboring a metaphor in a way that doesn't work anymore. So this is Brooke coming in. He's yelling at Zio and he says, I can promise you one of these days our Captain Luffy will become king of the pirates. He's a man who keeps his word no matter the cost. So if he says no harm will come to the people here, then no harm will come. I believe in him no matter what. So that ship will never touch this island. And now it's time for me to step up and do my part. I won't let you disappear before my eyes again, even though I have no eyes to speak of. And y'all, we go then back to the fucking blowfish monk and Sanji. I can't believe this is still happening. He's like humoring him by saying, oh yeah, he's huge. That's very, very impressive. But this thing eventually like lets the breath out and just starts flying around. Zoro, meanwhile, has sliced the blades off of the two swords that the octopus man is using, and that's when he starts to, secrete that weird poison. And then we go to Frankie, and he's about to try out this special move. And you guys, Frankie actually says in the dialogue, "I'm going balls out." That was unexpected. I didn't feel like they would be allowed to use that sort of language. I approve of it, for the record, but I didn't think that was going to be allowed. So, yeah, that was just a bit of a shock. So let's kind of jump ahead here to Chopper, who has turned into that massive version of himself again. This is so funny because it is the type of form that he was only able to achieve when he had too many rumble balls in the past. But evidently now he can do it, and he is in full control of himself. He's still here, and he's like, "Don't worry, Usopp, I know what I'm doing." And Usopp is clearly like, "Wait, what?" And later on, he explains, like, "I can fight in this form for, I think, a full 2 minutes. And, I won't pass out or anything. So you guys don't have to keep looking out for me anymore." And y'all know that this is like what I was hoping for when it came to Chopper, was just a moment where he got to a stage that he didn't have to be the guy left on the ship to watch it anymore, that he could actually be in on the fight. So I'm delighted with this, even though it is a rumble ball thing still. It's not like a form that he can just take on. But the episode, this one ends with Hordy once again chomping a bunch of pills, and we just start to see the transformation before the end pops up. So when we start the next episode, we get to see how they do that red light around him. It really is quite cool looking. I do like this animation technique. And Luffy is like, man, his bounty would have to be really high considering how incredibly tough he is. And Hordy just yanks himself out of the deck of the ship with like a scream. And his shoulders now are so big that they're almost at level with the top of his head. And he says, "I'm not letting you get out of here, Straw Hat. No chance in hell. The Noah will fall." And we had a moment earlier where Luffy is just like, "I'm not letting anybody I love die again." And he has the flashback to Ace and everything. And Luffy attempts the Gum Gum Jet Bazooka. And it hits Hordy, and it looked for a moment like he had made a hole in his stomach. And I was feeling like, all right, that seems like it was like maybe the death blow. Hordy bites him though, and Luffy pulls back, and he does armament hardening and punches again and sends Hordy flying. Again, it looks like there's actual smoke coming out of a hole in his stomach. So I'm feeling like, nice. But then when Hordy skids to a stop, his stomach is fine. There's nothing there anymore. It was very misleading. I thought something had really happened there. His teeth pop out yet again because he left them behind in Luffy's shoulder. And Luffy has them just lodged in his arm, and he hasn't even bothered to take him out yet. He's just standing there. It's kind of funny considering the size of them. And understandably, Luffy is starting to be like, all right, the fuck is this? How many times is he going to be able to get even stronger? And Hordy says, I was how can my power continue to surprise you? It was granted to me by heaven to overcome the humans, especially the likes of you. Again, where is this from? What's the deal? No mortal can best the power of the divine. I've surpassed the strength of man and fishman. No one can stop my revenge. And he's saying this as his eyes are like bleeding quite profusely. It is not good. Dude's in bad shape. He is about to like just crash hard. It's not going to be good. I am very curious if he just shrinks back down to his normal size once this begins to wear off or what. So I forgot about how Usopp compliments Chopper in his giant form, and Chopper starts to do that thing about like flattery doesn't work on me, that like little hula. And it is really great not only seeing it with this form, but they do like an effect on Chopper's voice as well, so he sounds crazy. And when he's just like, no, flattery won't work on me. And it's like the cutesy thing that's usually Chopper, like his little voice, but it's in this magnified, almost doubled. It's very, very weird sounding. I liked this moment a lot. Usopp calls it creepy. I don't agree. I just enjoy how weird it is. But yeah, so guys, I just want to point out, in the midst of all of this, we really don't get a check-in at all in these 3 episodes with Nami or Robin. Robin has intermittently been in and out with like the hand thing in the last episodes, but there's very, very little of them in this one. At one point we see that like there, when there's a bright flash, all of them looking, and Robin's like glasses giving a sort of bright yellow reflection, but the actual fighting going on with them, we don't see much of at all. And I was a little bit disappointed because I was excited when Nami jumped into the mix, and yet again, we really get very little of her actually fighting. And it feels like, I don't know if just like Oda couldn't come up with a lot for her tools to do and he felt limited, or if it's just supposed to be that she's not a fighter in the way that the others are, and so we shouldn't be expecting to see her like this. But I just really thought after 2 years that we would have more of her showing off the variety of things that she can do. And so far there hasn't been a lot that's brand new. It's been like more powerful versions of things that she already could do. So I'm hoping that we get a little bit more development on that. But okay, so back up to Hordy and Luffy. He like finally comes like a full force at Luffy, and I think he does one of those like bullet things. What is it that he sends his way? And Luffy goes down, and he's just face down, sliding down the deck of the ship, because again, they're like on the currently vertical deck of the Noah. So he is sliding. Everybody who is actually like keeping track of the fight is really, really flipped out because it looks like maybe he is dead. But then as Luffy is sliding, he brings his hand to his mouth. Now, guys, I will be honest with you. I thought we were about to see Luffy take one of those pills, and I was sort of like, oh, damn. I know that I shouldn't be cheering on the concept of Luffy taking drugs. The whole point of this is that, you know, our friends are dealing with power that they earned fair and square over the course of years with lots of training. But it feels very much for me like a bit of a fanfic thing that I would like to see happen. What if Luffy did take one of those pills? Just out of curiosity. But no, he is doing another armament hardening, and the fist that he creates is gigantic. And he does gum gum elephant gun and punches Hordy all the way back, like through a few layers of the ship, with essentially a wrecking ball the size of a house. And when he pulls his fist back, it's like his fist stuck to Hordy's flesh. It's so weird. I don't know what the animation is doing there, but it is super creepy. And Luffy is just yelling like, shut up, I have had enough of you. And he says elephant gatling and then goes in with that same fist. And reminder, like, we were supposed to not damage this ship. I just want to point that out. It seems like he has kind of forgotten that. But I guess, you know, things have gotten to a point where you got to prioritize a little bit, and getting rid of Hordy, that's the thing. We go back down to Brook dealing with Zio, and the slice that he does up Zio's middle with that like ice coming out of it. A blood-chilling wind howls from the land of the dead, sets skirts aflutter. Oh, this guy. And I'm looking at the clock here, and I am almost out of time. So I'm just going to sort of like jump and say that everybody that we're checking in on, they're mostly fighting in similar ways, but to what we have seen. But we get something really interesting, in my opinion, from Usopp, because he does a green star, and it's like a red ball, and something sprouts from the back of it, and it almost looks like it's the ornament on a Christmas tree. But then when the camera pulls back, it's the nose at the tip of this wolf that's like green. And Daruman says that I will rip it to shreds, but Usopp points out the tip of its nose and says, if you attack, that will release a devastating shockwave 3 meters wide, like this. And indeed, it's like doesn't even quite have to touch him. And he calls it Impact Wolf, and Daruman goes flying and screaming away. This fucking hammerhead is just spinning in a cyclone, saying, doing the docinest docin that ever docent did, Papara hammer, and comes at Chopper, who says Cloven Roseo Palm. And it's unclear to me exactly what Chopper's attack does. His fingers are like black, and I think that maybe they're supposed to be his claws, but they just knock this guy backward, and I'm not entirely sure if there's supposed to be more to it than that, but it breaks the tool that he was using. And then we have this fucking squid guy who's got that light at the top of his head. Frankie does radical beam, and he just shoots behind the guy, and it's not even like it hits him. It seems to like pass him, and he like is in midair, and that's when we see that light that everybody is sort of blinded by for a moment. Maybe it was supposed to have hit him, but it doesn't look like it did in that animation. I'm kind of unclear. I think that was a laser attack. When we come back to Luffy, he is still doing his elephant gun Gatling. Jimbei is doing his fishman karate, and he is handling the monk who is floating in the air at this point. And somebody is like, did he just spring a leak? All the air is going to come out. I kind of thought we were going to get a fart joke at this point, but no. He just basically kind of vomits the air up. And then our last check-in with Sanji, who comes up to him in midair and says, the last 2 years were a stain upon my soul. Okay, we get it. I went through hell. It isn't fair. I want to burn those days to ashes. And he lights on fire, yelling hell memories, and kicks Watatsumi. That's his name according to this subtitle. Thank you, subtitles. And he lights on fire. And then just begins to sink to the ground like sort of like a blimp that's like, so, like I said, guys, it's more interesting attacks from our friends, but whenever we go back to Luffy, it's sort of the same fight over and over again. I just feel like I keep seeing a lot of the same types of, it's punch, jump, run, punch, attack, like sprinting toward, punch again. a lot of the same. It just there's not even like a weapon that Arlong is using or anything to mix it up. But yeah, we see his body eventually like drop down, and it looks like he goes through the outside bubble of Fishman Island. He's like floating in midair, so to speak. And all of the soldiers and everything that are watching this, they're looking on saying, finally, Hordy's down. And we see Luffy continuing to pursue, like he's going to keep punching him. But the episode ends right there, and it was more abrupt than the endings of these episodes usually are. He's like yelling, and these guys had just finished their sentence, and it felt like really sudden and strange, that point to stop it. But you know, the episode is called Hordy's Finally Down, but I'm not sure if I believe it. I guess we're going to have to wait and see. All right, I have got to wrap this up. My dog clearly really needs to go to the bathroom. I'm so sorry. But thank you guys again for bearing with me on everything. Thank you, Florian. Appreciate you a lot. I hope y'all are enjoying the coverage. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.